So I'd love for you to take just a second and turn to the person next to you and just tell them in one word, do you want 2019 to be better or worse than 2018? On the count of three, go. All right, so now we know who's honest and who's sarcastic. I almost never talk to people who are like, man, I hope this year is way worse than last year, right? It doesn't happen. This cool thing happens at the turning of a year. It's very similar to like when you wake up each day. It's kind of a fresh start. It's a new chance. It's a way to go at it again. And there's a cool thing that happens when you turn the calendar over, when a new year happens. It's a chance to set a fresh intention, a chance to set out in a direction, to kind of renew some things that have lost a little bit of the passion that you had before. And if there's anything that we want to live around here, we want to live with conviction. We want to live with passion. We want every day, every moment to matter and move in a direction that's really, really helpful and positive for us and for the people around us. And so we're setting off in this series in January kind of in that direction. How do we live a year with great, great conviction? Now, I was reading, I love it, at the turn of the year, there's always advice on how to make New Year's resolutions. By the way, did you make resolutions? Anyone make New Year's resolutions? Some people do this, some people don't. There was lots of advice about how to do it. And one was, don't make specific, narrow, pass-fail options. Like, I'm going to go to the gym 4 times a week for the rest of my life, right? Oh, okay, I'm just going to be honest. I'm going to go to the gym 4 times. That's it. No, instead, set a direction with a theme like, I'm going to take greater care of my health this year than I did last year. So there's a theme and a direction that may have 4 days at the gym. It may have diet implications. It may have other things that you kind of set off in that direction. Or rather than saying, I'm going to read a book a week every week for the next 52 weeks, even though I haven't read a book in 3 years, rather to set off and say, no, I'm going to sharpen my mind better than I ever have before. And so that may include some smaller goals along the way that become pass-fail. But at the end of the year, there's a vision, a direction that you have for the end of the year that you hope things are different. And so you set off kind of in that direction. And that can be really helpful. And turning years and turning days are times that it's natural to do that. And it's something that we kind of do here as a church as well. We started to think about what could 2019 look like in the life of this group of people called Canyon Ridge. What would be different in this year? How would we set off in a direction that's really, really meaningful, that's really, really helpful? And so we kind of looked at our past a little bit and said, what has God been up to lately? What has he done before this? One of the things it seems that he's done in the life of our church is he's activating us. He's getting us more engaged in doing what he has said, not just hearing what he has said. This idea of us wanting to be life bringers is really starting to catch on and become a part of people with things like serve days and the way that they're doing life in their neighborhoods, the way that Light Up the Night and all these other things that we have done kind of as people to help people's lives fill up. Because we just believe around here that more Jesus in our lives means more life. That no one lived a more impactful, passionate, convicted life than Jesus did. And the more we live like him, the more we invite people to live with him, the more all of our lives fill up. And so we're like, that's been good. But in this statement that we make all the time as a church of joining Jesus to bring life to everyone, everywhere, every day, we're like, I think we could really take some steps forward in what it means to join Jesus. What if at the end of 2019, we knew Jesus better than we ever had before? That if people spent time looking at his life and knew how to look at his life really well and invite that and apply that in their own lives. If Jesus really did live the most full kind of life, and if he really is inviting us into the fullest kind of life, then one of the best ways we can make 2019 a better year than ever is to spend more time looking at Jesus than we ever have before. And so we said, okay, let's think about what that looks like. So we said, it would probably look like we talk about him and his life every single weekend for the entire year, which we pretty much plan to do. It would mean that we set off in that direction and start to ask some questions beyond some of the questions that we've asked about Jesus before, which we're going to do. In fact, we could begin with Hebrews chapter 12. This kind of became the hinge pin of where we're going to set off for the next year. So whether you're jumping into the new year at church and you haven't been around much before, this is a great picture of where we're headed. If you've been around for a while, this is what you're going to get for the next year. You all ready? Here we go. Hebrews chapter 12, 1-3. It says this. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up, and let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. We do this by, here's kind of the phrase that sparked all of this, by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. Because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and now he's seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. Think of all the hostility he endured from sinful people, and then you won't become weary and give up. As a church, we really believe that we want to be people who are constantly joining Jesus in bringing life. That the life he fills us up with, we offer to everyone around us. It fills us up, it fills others up. The life that we actually have always longed to live is the life we live more into the more we keep our eyes on Jesus. And so this year, we're setting off in this direction of following Jesus, and we're doing it kind of around this idea of why. In fact, I want to commission all of you. Here's your job for the next month, if you're going to be a part of this whole thing, Canyon Ridge. Your job for the next month is to act like a toddler. Some of you are like, I know somebody that's got that down. And here's what I mean. With every single aspect of your life, and single thing that has found its way onto your calendar, to every single relationship that you're in, I want you to ask a simple question that every toddler is a pro at. Why? I want you to we are going to relentlessly ask the question, why? Why go to work tomorrow? Why get up at a particular time? Why eat that? Why decide to go to the gym? Why read that book? Right? Just constantly over and over and over. Toddlers are pros at this, and you've learned how to do it. You just do it in different ways now that you're an adult. You're a little more polite about it. But why? Why? Because I believe that Jesus lived with the most compelling why there ever was. And it caused him to live the most remarkable, impactful life, that he lived the fullest, most compelling kind of life because Jesus lived with the fullest, most compelling why. That when we have a great reason for do things, we will endure great things to get there, that we can set off a course. And so January 2019 is all about this, finding your why. Now, we've noticed that a lot more young men seem to be attending these days, and it's not find your wife, okay? That's not what we're saying. Find your why, all right? Maybe, who knows, right? Find your why in 2019. So why? And when you've answered the question why, ask why again, and then ask why again, and then ask why again, until there's a conviction and a passion. Because if there's something that we want in our lives, is I don't know about you, but I want every moment and every day of my life to matter for something. I want the things that I do to be done with great conviction and inspiration. I want to be captivated by the things that actually fill my life. I'm not looking for a life that's like, well, that's what everybody else does. I'm not looking for a life that, well, that's what I've always done. Right? That's not what we're really actually looking for. In fact, for a lot of people, even though they'll make some New Year's resolutions, 2019 will be an exercise in Einstein's definition of insanity, right? Which is expecting different results even though you're doing the exact same thing, right? It's crazy talk. Now let's make some shifts. Let's make some changes. And so one of the best ways to do that is to relentlessly, over and over and over, ask the question, why? Because a compelling why is really, really powerful. A compelling why helps us keep us focused in a particular direction. That we know why we're doing something, we can stay focused on that. And even really good things that might be around us won't distract us and become sideways energy, but instead we can head off in the direction that we actually want to go. We can take what could be a good idea and set it aside for what we know, what we are passionate about running toward. A compelling why empowers us to make really good decisions, to say yes to some things and say no to other things, that we can lock in and do that. A compelling why can sustain us when things get really, really hard, right? People who make New Year's resolutions that are just really popular and they're good ideas for most people, it's why they don't last, because their why is not strong enough. It's why you should wait till February to sign up for the gym, okay? Be a lot less people, be a lot cheaper. Because some people are like, I probably should get in shape, instead of, I have to. I have a compelling reason that this really matters. And so when it gets hard in a couple or 3 weeks, when we're tired of it, when we don't want to get up that time of day, a compelling why can motivate us and remind us why we're going there. And it frees us from comparison. A compelling why frees us from just comparing ourselves to other people or adopting their whys. Instead of looking at Instagram and figuring out how we measure up, which, by the way, you never will, right? Facebook and Instagram are not good measurements. Comparison to other people, not great measurements. A compelling, personally arrived at conviction about why you do what you do can be so sustaining and focusing and free us from comparison. And so we're going to lean in on it. For the next month, we're not going to try to do it in a day. We're not going to try to do it in a week. We're going to take the whole month and we're going to look at this and ask questions over and over about every aspect of our lives. Why? Jesus lived with a compelling why, and it was right there in the scripture that I just read for you. In Hebrews chapter 12, it says this. It says because, which, by the way, I think Spanish is this way. I think some other languages are this way. But in a lot of languages, why and because are the same, right? And in our families, don't those always come together, why and because? Kid says why, and you say because. That's it, right? Because I said so, yeah? Because I brought you, anyway. Too much. It says this in verse 12, the second half. It says, Jesus did all this because of the joy awaiting him. Because of the joy awaiting him. He had a compelling why for what he was doing. He had such a compelling why that he endured the cross, disregarding its shame. And now he's seated at the right. He's sitting in the place of honor beside God's throne. You see, Jesus had the most compelling why, and what that did for him was it allowed him, he had a vision for what could be and what should be, right? And so if we're going to have a compelling why, what we've got to begin with is a picture of how things could be, and really in our spirit, how they should be, so that we can move in that direction with conviction. He had a picture of the future that was different than what he arrived in. Now, with Jesus' life and with most historic figures, a lot of what people will do is they'll read the story from the end. They'll read about remarkable people and the things that they achieved, forgetting that when they set out on that journey, that's not what it looked like. That there was a difference between where they showed up and where they left. That where they were and where they were going were two different things, and there was a whole journey in between. That the thing that made it the thing out there, everybody wants that without the thing that actually makes it the thing. I'll tell you later. Anyway, the journey of investment, the journey of patience, the journey of cost to get from where they arrived to where they get to required that they had a compelling why, or they would quit where a lot of other people would quit. They would sustain them if their why was strong enough. For Jesus, he arrived in a world that was broken, a world where people were not connected in relationship with God the way that God had always intended for them to be. We celebrate this with the Christmas story, that heaven didn't wait for us to earn our way to him, that heaven came to us, that Jesus showed up in our mess. And he lived in that for a very long time, for 30 plus years. And he arrived into a world where it had been 400 years since the people of God had really heard much from God, that their disobedience and distance had cost them so much in their relationship with God. But Jesus had a vision and a picture of a time where people could be connected with God intimately, where every single person, God could literally set up camp in their lives, where they would never have to doubt their identity or their purpose or their provision, where they could live in security and safety and in community, where he would slowly, piece by piece, put them back together and form them into the people that they had always intended to be. He had a vision for all that, and that was such a compelling why for him. It was a captivating, inspiring why. That the journey from disconnected everyone to God to everyone can be connected to God was a journey he was willing to take. Because of this joy of connecting everyone who would be willing to trust God into an intimate relationship with him was enough to get him through all kinds of stuff in the meantime. For this joy of returning to God, having conquered sin and death, he, it says, endured the cross, disregarding its shame. In other words, for this vision, for this compelling why that Jesus had, he decided that whatever it cost, it was worth it. He decided that whatever it cost, it was worth it. And let's be clear about what it cost. We could talk for a long time about what it cost Jesus. Not just giving up heaven and entering earth and the brokenness of this, of submitting to a family where he was mocked by his siblings, where everyone, can you imagine being Jesus' sibling? Come on, you would have given him the business too, right? Like he had to deal with all of that. And then he begins on this journey where he's excluded, where, yeah, he rises in some popularity in some places and has good things along the way, but he has tough choices to make about where to apply his energy. Because this once omnipotent God had located himself in one person, one place, one time, so he had to choose between good and great, which we'll talk about in a couple weeks. Over and over, he gave up all that, but let's just skip to the end, shall we? We could talk for a long time about what Jesus endured in terms of suffering, with a lot of chances to quit. But even if we just look at one angle of what Jesus endured, it says that he disregarded its shame. Not even the physical torture that he endured on our behalf, not just the social exclusion, but the shame that he endured, the mockery that people threw at him, that he was put before juries and for a trial, this whole Sanhedrin and all these different people, Romans and Jews and all kinds of people accusing him of things he never did, shaming him in front of everyone, and then throwing a crown on him and a robe and mocking him as this king, spitting on him. He can't see, so they're saying, hey, who hit you? Who hit you? Constantly mocking him. You know what it's like to be mocked. You know what it's like to experience shame. In fact, at the very word, people usually just kind of withdraw. It's the last thing we want. And he endured boatloads of it. Not to mention that he would have the beam thrown on his back and he would walk miles out to the side of the city, enduring all this after having been beaten and then hung up on the side of the road where people who didn't even know what was going on would come along and mock him based on the title that had been given him on a plaque above his head. He endured so much. Do you know why he did that? Because his why was worth it. You know what his why was? You and me in relationship with God. He had such a compelling and captivating why that no matter what it cost, he was going to finish it. It's that kind of conviction that is required for us to enter into all the things that God has for us in this year. Whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, I think you'll find this to be true, that all good things are uphill, yeah? How many of you have stumbled and lazied your way into the best things in life? Not very often. You know why? Because every good thing comes at a cost. There is always a cost. The question is, do we have a why that makes it worth it? Do we have a conviction and a passion that says, yep, I'm going through it? We want everything to be cheap. Like this one time, I went into a video store. You guys remember video stores? Those were good times. It wasn't Blockbuster. It was a different one. For those of you who are young, you used to have to go places and get some sort of device of various kinds, whether beta, VHS, DVD, whatever it was, and just hope that it was behind the box. Anyway, take that. You remember, don't you? You show up and there's hundreds of them and none of them have one. It's like, oh, come on. Anyway, rented a DVD and I go to the checkout, and of course they place all the candy and snacks right at the checkout. So as you're waiting, you're staring your favorite candy in the face, right? And so there's this whole rack, and I love spicy stuff, and so there's this whole rack of hot tamales. I love hot tamales, but it wasn't just hot tamales. It was fire hot tamales, and I'd never had them. I'm like, oh, nice, upgrade, right? I'm like, but I'm cheap. So I take one box and hope it's less than $1. And so they put it in, and they ring it up, and the thing displays 3 cents. And I'm like, what? And so I asked her, I'm like, hey, I don't think that's right. You know, something went wrong. You just scan it against me. No, it's 3 cents. I'm like, well, is there something wrong with it? Like, do hot tamales expire? I know it's not exactly a fresh food, but. So she goes and asks her manager, no, they're not. There's nothing wrong with it. We're just getting rid of them. I'm like, huh. Look at the thing. Look at her. Look at the thing. Just grab every single box in the store. They're like falling off the conveyor. Throw the display up on there as well. 37 pounds of hot tamales for like $1.50. It was awesome. It was the greatest thing ever. That's what we want. We want everything that's good with none of the cost. It just doesn't happen that way. The truth is, there's always a cost. The question is, do we have a why on the other side of that cost that makes it worth it, right? So when you have to get up on Monday morning to go to work, why? Why are you going to work? Do you have a compelling, inspiring, convicting reason to go do the thing that you're about to do for however many hours you're about to do it? When you're exhausted as a parent at the end of the day, right? Why do they go to bed at 6 o'clock? Because I need sanity. That's why. No. Why? When you're tired, when you just want to rest, and that conversation comes up, do you have a compelling why to step in? If you're going to sign up for the gym, why? Why are you going to do that? Is there a compelling, because there will be a cost with all of that. The question is, on the other side, do we have a sharp enough vision, a compelling and convicting why that gets us through it? Because we know it will take that. Jesus had that. And it carried him through the most and it says that he disregarded its shame. In other words, he counted the shame as almost nothing, like a non-factor, which blows my mind, right? Make no mistake, Jesus was not like arrested and killed. He gave up his life. He was arrested and they killed him, but he gave up his life. He did that willingly, and it says that he disregarded it, like it was almost a non-issue. That's how powerful his why was. In fact, this guy named Paul would say something similar. This guy named Paul, who you should read 2 Corinthians 11 sometime for all that he went through on behalf of Jesus. But he says this about the hardship we face. He says, our light and momentary troubles are not worth comparing to the glory that will be revealed in us. Now, I don't know about the troubles in your life, but they seldom in my life feel light and momentary. But he's saying, no. What God will achieve in our lives is worth it. If our why is compelling enough, we'll endure all of those things. And so Paul endured a lot because his why, in fact, the bigger the cost, the bigger the why you're going to need. Now, Jesus had something going for him that we also have going for us. It's this. He knew how it would end. So he knew that there was an end, and he knew how it would end. So even though Jesus endured all of these things, he knew how it ended because God said how it would end, and Jesus trusted him. In fact, if you missed last week, we talked a ton about this idea of faith and how do we trust the things that God has said? How do we live as people of faith? Jesus did. God said, I'm going to rescue the world through you. I've sent you there for that reason. You'll pay for that, but then you'll raise to a brand new kind of life, and you'll invite all kinds of people to a new kind of life. Jesus knew how it would end. Now, I don't think that he knew how it would go. I don't think he knew every step along the way. Hebrews seems to indicate that Jesus learned along the way. That some people think Jesus was this magical person who he knew everything about everything all the way along through his life, and I don't get that from the scripture. I think he didn't know exactly how it would go, but he did know how it would end. And so it carried him through. And for those of us who follow Jesus, we know how it ends. In fact, that same guy I was talking about earlier, Paul, he says it this way, well, in my own little paraphrase. He's like, if I live, awesome, I'll serve you and help you know Jesus. If I die, sweet, I'm going to go be with Jesus. Win-win, right? That's basically what he said. We know that Jesus will finish what he has begun in us. And so those of us who trust Jesus, those of us who keep our eyes focused on Jesus, when he is our why, we can have confidence that God will finish it right. He will make it right in the end. So even if everything between here and there is challenging, even if it's difficult, even if it's costly, if we allow God to give us a compelling why for everything that we're doing, even when it's hard to go to work on Monday morning, even when the last thing you want to do is talk your kid through that, even when the last thing you want to do is make that phone call that you're not even sure they're going to answer, we pay the cost because we know that what God has in mind is worth it. We can trust him. So here's what we're going to do for the next month. We're going to try to figure out how do we find and live toward our why. Now, whether you're a follower of Jesus, you can come up with this. You may come up with a passionate, convicting why, but I'm convinced that there's none greater than Jesus. So how do we find and live toward our why? The way we do this, I think, according to Hebrews chapter 12, it says this in verse 2. It says, we do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus. Now, he gives us a couple reasons for that I'll tell you here in a minute, but let me just give you a how-to for how, well, let me say this. Keep our eyes on Jesus. We got to focus. We got to choose a direction and go there. When I first got into high school, it was my first chance to play football, tackle football. We played a bunch of pickup football. We had our own pads and all that stuff. We'd never played organized football. It was a small town, and really, if you were athletic at all, you had to be on the team or there wasn't going to be a team. And so freshman football, middle of August, it's 100 degrees with like 1,000% humidity, and we all go out there. And the coach, before we even start stretching, he says, I'm going to teach you how to run. And I'm like, dude, we're here because we can run. Like, we've been running since we were little. But I didn't back talk because we also had this thing called happy time, and it wasn't happy. And so I didn't. I just did what he said. And so he puts us in like 8 lines, 7 or 8 players deep each, and you go 10 yards back and forth with this thing, and there were different steps. One was like high knees and glute kick and side to side and punch and hang, which I still don't know why it was called that. But the first one was this. It was focus. And all we had to do, the very first thing I ever did in high school football, which I had grown up watching, dreaming of playing, thought that players were the coolest people ever, and the first thing he says is, run in a line without taking your eyes off a spot. He says, focus. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. And then I watched a grade schooler run. You ever watch a grade schooler run? They got body parts flying everywhere, right? They look like this. You start putting pads and a helmet on that, it looks like a bobblehead going crazy, right? He says, no, lock in. He says, you used to run for fun, but if you want to get there fast and first, you want to run with purpose, you got to focus. You got to choose a spot and go there. Essentially, that's what we're going to do for the next year, and especially in this series. We're going to keep our eyes on Jesus. Every single weekend teaching will feature a part of Jesus' life. We're going to try to equip our church through the whole year to look over and over at Jesus' life. For those of you who've never known how to read the Bible or trying to figure that whole thing out, we're going to step into that. In fact, we're going to start this month. I want to encourage every single one of you to grab a Bible if you don't have one, download the app if you don't have it, and just read one chapter of Matthew every day this month. There's going to be stuff you run into that you don't understand. There's going to be stuff you're like, I don't know what to do with this. Just grab onto the parts that you do. Whether you've read it 100 times or you've never read it before, the book of Matthew is just one of the stories of Jesus' life. And you can ask a question. One of the best things you can do when you read the Bible, if we're going to keep our eyes on Jesus, let's look at the real thing. In fact, some of you have only ever watched Christians. You've never actually looked at Jesus. Now, I know a lot of really phenomenal people who follow Jesus, but they don't look exactly like Jesus because every single one of us is broken. If you really want to figure out if this thing matters, if Jesus is legit, you should look at the real thing. And so, one chapter of Matthew every time. Now, if you don't follow Jesus yet, I would encourage you to ask this question. Who is this guy? And just write down every adjective you can imagine to describe the person that you're reading about. What describes Jesus? Who is this guy? If you've been around church for a little while, have a little bit of awareness of Jesus, you may be even trying to follow him, but you've never really had a habit of reading the Bible, I just encourage you to ask the same question we're asking of ourselves. Why? Why did Jesus do that? What was his motivation? Why did he do that over and over and over? Get to know Jesus in that way. Or maybe you've read Matthew 25, 100 times, I don't know. Maybe you could try a fresh question like, why did he train his replacements the way he did? Because Jesus was very intentional about raising up disciple makers who would continue what he started. Why did he do that? How did he do that? But lean in and keep your eyes on Jesus, because what Hebrews says is that he is the initiator and perfecter of our faith. Now, this word initiator, what it really means is someone who goes first as a way to show an example, right? You've played Simon Says, maybe, right? It's the idea that we do what he does, that he goes first with the intention of setting an example. Some translations will say he's the author of our faith. So the point is that if we want to know why we should do what we're doing, we should look at why he did what he did. Because Jesus' why guides our why. If we're a follower of Jesus, why he did what he did is the same reason for why we do what we do. Even to the most common of New Year's resolutions, that his why is the same as ours. Now, as you read through Jesus' life, you'll see things like Jesus said, hey, I came to preach the good news. Okay, so maybe we should quit our job, move to Israel, become an itinerant preacher with no home. No, that's not how we apply it. But there is good news that God has brought into our lives that we take everywhere that we go. In the same way that Jesus went everywhere with the intention of inviting people into relationship with God, we do the same thing, right? Even to the most mundane of things in life. Like suppose you did actually decide to join a gym and start working out. Why? Why would you do that? To lose weight. Why? So I don't have a heart attack and die at 40. Why? Right? You see where you get super toddler on this. This is going to be fun. Spouses are excited right now, right? Like, I've been waiting for that kind of permission. Why? Over and over and over. Well, I have this theory, and I want you to test it with me this month. I think, I'm not sure this is true, so don't write it down. But if it is, you can tell me later. I think that if a follower of Jesus is asked why long enough, eventually the answer will be Jesus. Like, why should you work out? Well, because I want to be in better shape. Well, why do you want to be in better shape? Well, because I was bought with a price. My body's not my own. It's God's temple, and so I should take care of it. I want to take care of it. Or maybe somebody says this, well, why should you work out? Well, because I want to be able to play with my kids for a long time. Well, why do you want to do that? Well, because the last time I was on a ski lift with my son who was snowboarding, we had the most epic conversation about Jesus. And if I wasn't in shape, I would have missed that, right? So over and over and over, why are you going to... Doesn't matter. I think if you ask why long enough, why do you go to work? Well, I need to get paid. Well, that's true, but why? There's lots of places you can go from there, right? because foster families need support, and if I don't work, I won't be able to support them the way that we did in December. Because I want to be able to provide experiences for my kids, but why? Why? I think if you ask why long enough to a follower of Jesus, you'll always find your way back to Jesus. Test that out. Help me know if it's true. But Jesus' why guides what our why is. It should be shaped by who he is. If our eyes are focused on him, why we do anything has everything to do with him. And if that's true, if our why is compelling and captivating enough, if it has captured our heart, then we can endure a lot in the direction that we're really hoping to go. Not only does Jesus' why guide our why, but I think Jesus' strength is our strength. It says not only that Jesus is the author or initiator of our faith, it also says that he is the perfecter of our faith. Perfect in the Bible has to do more with completion than with lack of error. It has to do with bringing things to their fullness. And so there's two ways in which Jesus does this for us. The first way is this, that we know we can take this journey of faith toward God because Jesus has already done it. He finished it. He is the one who has completed it, so we know it can be completed. We know it can be done. He's done it. But not only that, but he is our strength, that kind of like one who finishes the race, loops back around to those behind him and runs with them. That he actually provides strength for us. In fact, that's what Jesus accomplished. When he forgave us of our sins, it's not just so that we can be with God forever, it's so that we can be with God now. That the Holy Spirit sets up camp in our lives to help us conquer those bad habits that we keep shooting ourselves in the foot with, to keep us focused and away from distraction, to discern what are the best things to do with our life, not just some good or average or normal things to do with our life. The Holy Spirit helps us. Jesus' strength is our strength. It's why in Philippians chapter 1, Paul could say with confidence that he who began a good work in us will be faithful to bring it to completion, that he will finish what we together with him have started. And so think about this. Do our commitments in 2019, our jobs, our relationships, our debts, our financial commitments, our activities, our hobbies, our diet, do our commitments in 2019 have a compelling why behind them? Do you have to do those things? Is there something in you that there's a passion and a conviction, an inspiring, convicting why that just says, I have to do this. I've got to get to work because I've got to spend this time with my kids. Not I should, not it's a good idea to, but I need to. I have to do this thing. Do we have a passionate conviction around each of those things? Because the truth is God has laid some things before us, and I think that there is a captivating why for all the things that he gives us. In chapter 12, verse 1, the end of it says this, let us run with endurance. Let us run with endurance the race that God has set before us. So another way to ask the question that I just asked about our commitments in 2019, what race has God set before you? Have you and he come to a passionate, inspiring, captivating, compelling why for the things you're going to do in 2019? Because if you do, the things in 2019 could really matter. They could be the most important things, not just good things, not just filler, not just average things, but things that really matter. Now, if you get super toddler on yourself for the next month and get crazy about this, either in the morning or at the night, and just reflect, why did I do all those things? Why am I about to do all these things? And wrestle through, what you're going to find is a renewed passion for some of the things that you should keep doing. Like a conviction and a compelling why to go after those things. What you also might find is some fresh, as you look at the life of Jesus, a chapter of Matthew every day, you may find some new, fresh, compelling reasons to do some of the things that you've been doing. And that's really great. Some of the things on your calendar won't change at all. But some things will. And there are some things in your calendar that no matter how long you ask why, you can't come up with a good reason. And you know what you should do with those things? Say that magic word. You know what the magic word is? No. Just no. Just get them off your calendar. A lot of people go through their closets in their homes and clean them out around the new year. How about cleaning out your calendar? There's all kinds of things that you've just been doing. There may be even good things. They're just not great things to be done with passion and conviction. And this crazy thing might happen if you do this. If you find some of those things and you get rid of them, you may actually find some space in your calendar What would that be like? And then God would have the opportunity to place some things in your life that would bring about some newness in your life, some more important, meaningful, eternal, lasting things that are worth you giving your time and your energy and your money and your emotion because you're convicted and passionate about those things. He would actually create some space. Now, if you're like me, you have a tendency to get distracted. Anybody get distracted? Some of you are distracted right now. You're thinking like, it's lunchtime, bro. Wrap it up. I will. Calm down. Some of you are like, oh yeah, I'm focused, squirrel, right? You're just like, we're going to talk about that next week. Be back next week. The week after that. Anybody ever shoot yourself in the foot? Anybody set the best of intentions and then do the very opposite? And you're like, what the heck did I just do? It's week 3. Don't miss it. We're going to talk about that, how we often work against ourselves and how do we get around that. Anybody ever set out in the best of directions and then just wear out before you finish? Week 4, endurance, how God fills us with it. This is worth your time to set off in 2019, all the while keeping our eyes focused on Jesus. So don't miss a week. And if you do, check it out online because God has some great things to call all of us to as we set out on this year of keeping our eyes focused on Jesus so that every single moment, every single conversation, every single relationship, every day at work, every day at home can matter. It can be the most important things done with a compelling vision and a picture of how things could be, and the strength and support of a God who has even greater things in mind than we can imagine. It's worth our time and attention. So we'll do it together. Would you stand and pray with me? And so, God, just really simply, we need your help. God, I'm grateful for so many great things that happened in 2018 because you were with us and you led us, and you're just good. You're a generous Father. It's who you are. But God, I do believe with conviction that the best is yet to come, and you have more in mind, that you're always up to something. And so, God, we just want to do that with you, and we want to live like Jesus. He's the best. And so, God, I pray that you would go ahead of us, that as we take some inventory and relentlessly ask this question, why, God, that you would help us arrive at the best answers, having everything to do with you, so that we can live lives of purpose, lives that matter, lives of meaning, not without adversity, not without challenge, but in a direction that really is fulfilling, is the life that you've imagined for us, God. We love you and we're counting on you. We desperately need you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Don't miss it. We'll see you next week.